Hello and welcome to Face Off here on France 24. The mother of all elections, the presidential election is less than a year away. While the far-right National Front is riding high in the polls and most of the attention is focused on the ruling Socialist and the opposition Conservative, a fourth force could also play a decisive role, the far left. Last weekend, its leader, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, officially launched his presidential bid in Paris, boosted by double-digit polls. With me to discuss what the far left could do in next year's presidential election, Philippe Turl from Radio France Internationale, and Stéphane de Vries, who is the Paris correspondent for the Dutch TV station RTL 4. So back in 2012, Jean-Luc Mélenchon scored 11% in the presidential elections. However, since then, he has struggled mightily, losing one election after the other and seeing many of his supporters flock to the far right. But he has decided to once again throw his hat into the ring for next year's election. He chose the Stalingrad Square in Paris, named after the infamous World War II battle, to begin the war.
I'm calling out to you. I'm telling you that this campaign is not just a way to speak out and testify. I'm calling you to a campaign to seize power, a campaign for victory.
So just to have an idea of where Jean-Luc Mélenchon is in the race, here are some polls that were taken recently for next year's presidential election, round one. So clearly we see the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen, is well ahead with the opposition conservative candidate, depending on who will be designated by a primary taking place in the poll. But more interestingly, on the left, we see that the incumbent, François Hollande, has some 14% of voting intentions, and Jean-Luc Mélenchon has 12%. So clearly, there's a battle on the left that's not decided yet, and the far left will be a player.
Yes, absolutely. And it should be mentioned that Jean-Luc Mélenchon is a former member of the Socialist Party. So he's from François Hollande's party, actually. And he's now he's trying to agglomerate all the parties on the left, because there are many parties on the left and the extreme left in France. Of course, the former communists, the Trotskyists, the Labour Party, extreme left Labour Party. So there are many forces on the left. And Jean-Luc Mélenchon thinks that he's the one who is able to be the only candidate for all these parties. And he also presents himself as a serious alternative to the socialists who like to vote left, but who think they think that François Hollande is not left enough, and they are disappointed by his presidency. So that's where he's playing. He's playing to the very left side of the political field in France, which has been abandoned for the last couple of years.
Yes, because as I mentioned, Jean-Luc Mélenchon scored 11%, which was an honorable performance 4 years ago. However, this alliance on the left that he had forged, it was called the Front de Gauche, the leftist front, hasn't worked. Nevertheless, maybe because the presidential election is a peculiar election, his polls are rather good despite all the problems he's gone through.
Well, 4 years ago, Jean-Luc Mélenchon threw his weight behind François Hollande in the second round of the French presidential elections and helped François Hollande get elected. He's now angry with François Hollande because he says that...
He's been for a long time.
For a long time, saying that he's not respected the promises he made during his election campaign in 2011, 2012, and has really undertaken a campaign of liberalism in France and almost right-wing policies, helping company bosses and not the workers. So there's a void that's been created that Jean-Luc Mélenchon sees as maybe a group of the electorate that he can take control of, who are dissatisfied with François Hollande, dissatisfied with the Socialist Party, don't want to vote for the right wing. So they are open to maybe another candidate. What is interesting this time round is, up until fairly recently, I don't think many people would have bet any money, any euros on Jean-Luc Mélenchon's chances. Including himself, because he was even, he tried to beat Marine Le Pen in Beaumont during a regional local election and was very badly defeated by her. So this time round, I don't think many people would have bet on his chances. Now we see him just below François Hollande in the opinion polls. What will change for him is the day if he manages to get ahead of François Hollande in the opinion polls. We see François Hollande on 12 and Jean-Luc Mélenchon on 14. Then he's going to start being taken as a very serious contender for the left-wing candidate for next year's presidential elections. And where that will eventually cause problems for the Socialist Party is that if the left is going to stand any chance of being elected next year, it's going to have to be united. And if you've got Jean-Luc Mélenchon running as a candidate for the far left, you might even have the Communist Party running as well. They're not sure whether or not they're going to field a candidate, whether they're going to support Jean-Luc Mélenchon. That still remains unsure. And also then you have a Socialist Party candidate, maybe François Hollande. That means the left will have no chance at all of being elected.
Right. One major difference that Philip just alluded to is last time around, Jean-Luc Mélenchon was the candidate of the leftist front, which included the Communist Party. This time around, he's essentially jumped the gun and said, I'm going to be the candidate. The communists are not in total agreement. This might cause a problem, but I guess he's hoping that if the polls are good, the communists are going to rally behind him, as well as other on the left.
Yeah, that's basically part of his personality. He's basically bullying himself into trying to bully the other people to present him as a candidate. He has no party behind him. It's really him, very personal campaign. And the communists this time, they have said, well, we're probably not going to support Jean-Luc Mélenchon. They have not decided yet. But it would be a very strange way of choosing a candidate because nobody actually had something to say about whether Jean-Luc Mélenchon could have been a candidate or not. So it's not very democratic, but it's part of his personality. He's a very rough guy. He always insults many people. He doesn't really take into account the opinions of other party members. He's pretty controversial, but that's a strategy that could work.
Right. One technical issue, it's not a technical issue, is you need 500 signatures, 500 sponsors to be able to run for a presidential election. And if you don't have a party apparatus behind you, it makes it very difficult. We know the National Front has for years struggled to get those 500 signatures. This might be a problem for Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
It could be a problem. The big problem for Jean-Luc Mélenchon is, as I said earlier, the divide within the left. He's a strong person, he's got a strong character, he's got a strong candidate, if you like, but he's got a weak backing. He's got no real strong party machine behind him to bring him forward. So when you're out to try to get your signatures to be eligible to run as a candidate in the presidential election, if you haven't got that apparatus behind you, it's incredibly difficult. And if more candidates on the left are vying for those signatures which come from mayors and elected officials around France, then he may struggle to get them. I think that what Jean-Luc Mélenchon is banking on is what we see as a general wave in Europe at the moment is dissatisfaction with the political classes as they are, the desire amongst voters for something different. We'd like to emulate in France what we've seen with Syriza and with Podemos. He sees himself as the next far left leader who could maybe bring forward one of these movements and sweep the boards in France and take power. Don't think France is quite ready for that just yet, but certainly there is a momentum behind him. It remains to be seen whether he can actually forge this momentum within the far left, within the ecologists who are split between themselves about what to do with the communists, as we've just been saying, to give him the necessary support he needs, above all, to get those 500 signatures, which will be his first hurdle.
Right. But also, this begs the question about François Hollande. The president has said, I will declare whether I will run or not at the end of the year. But if polls are showing that he's neck to neck with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, there could be pressure within the party to say, okay, maybe we need another horse for this race.
Absolutely, and that's what a lot of party members would like to see as well. They want a primary, just like there was one 5 years ago in 2011, won by François Hollande at the time. And the party leader says, well, I'm not so sure whether we will organize a primary. In principle, it's okay, but there's no date. So a couple of party members now takes the party to court in order to get a primary, to decide upon a date. It will probably, if there's a primary, it will probably take place in November. because there's also a primary of course, of the right in November and December. And that means that François Hollande will have to declare much earlier than he was intending to do his candidacy, and that could be a serious blow to his strategy. I think he's waiting too long, and maybe he should start his campaign already directly after the summer, because if he waits until the end of this year, he may have lost the momentum already, and then, well, he will stand very little chance to win.
Do you agree he's in the danger zone?
I don't really agree about that. I think he's trying to emulate what other former presidents have done in the past, and that's leave it as late as possible. So to destabilise those who want to be candidates, saying we don't know if François Hollande's going to be a candidate or not. Of course, everybody knows that he wants to be a candidate. I don't think there will be a primary in the Socialist Party for candidate, because I think François Hollande won't accept it as the outgoing incumbent leader. He is the automatic, as they say in French, the natural candidate, even if he is behind Jean-Luc Mélenchon in the polls. And between now and December, that's a long time in politics in France, and even further to the elections next year in May, and a lot can happen between now and then. Jean-Luc Mélenchon is going to have to keep this momentum up and his support, and so has François Hollande, who's hoping there's going to be more lowering of the unemployment rate, an end to the strikes at the moment. Maybe he'll secure a little boost in the opinion polls during the Euro 2016 football tournament. So there's a lot to play for. I think it's too early for him to throw himself into the ring.
Okay, we'll continue to be watching closely the polls here in France and what happens in the streets and in Parliament. Thank you very much for watching this edition of Face Off on France 24.